What's up guys, welcome back to All Things Christian Rock. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a quick ranking of Red's albums from my personal least favorite to my favorite. Now you might be thinking this is a weird time to be doing this video because they're going to be putting out new music soon. Let me go ahead and defend why I'm doing this video now. It's a two-part answer. One being, every time Red puts out a new album, their new music kind of shoots to the top of the list because I have the hype. Red's my favorite band. I get excited when they put out new music and I jump to the conclusion that it's probably the best music they've ever written, even if a couple weeks from now my opinion's going to change because I'm going to take a step back and I'm gonna kind of regather my thoughts. Secondly, when Gone came out, their record contract ended and now they are independent artists and they have made it very clear that they might stray away from the traditional we'll put out an album every 2 or 3 years, and they might go to releasing singles and EPs and not do traditional record structures anymore, at least not fully. So since I've never done a video like this, let me kind of explain how I go about approaching these things. I am an audio engineering major in college, so a lot of it has to do with how it's produced, how it's recorded. Even if that doesn't really affect the band, it affects how you listen to it. And a lot of it has to do with the songwriting, and I kind of look at it from all aspects. A lot of it has to do with the lyrics, some of it has to do with the melodies, but a lot of it is the instrumentation. I play a lot of instruments. I've been in a lot of bands across a lot of different genres in the past few years, so I'm pretty analytical of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's just my opinion. And I know for a fact that some of the things I'm going to say are going to be controversial, especially to die-hard Red fans like myself. If you disagree, comment below, let me know. Check the comments every few days. Also, get in touch with me via the All Things Christian Rock Facebook page. There's a link to that in the description of the video. I post news and videos and new stuff all the time about your favorite Christian rock and metal bands. I'm very responsive on there. I'm posting stuff every day. So without further ado, let's get started. Number 6, we have Gone. 2017 brought us Red's most recent effort. David Kraft of Jesus Freak Hideout gave the album a 3 out of 5 stars, stating that it is exceptionally listenable. Unfortunately, I feel like that's the best way to describe this album. I have a lot of fun listening to this album. Even though it's my least favorite of their albums, I probably listen to it just as much, if not more, than a lot of the other ones on this list. Why? Because it's produced really well. There's tons of things going on. There's tons of ear candy, and it makes it interesting, so you'll listen to it, and even if you didn't love it, you're gonna go back and listen to it again because you had fun listening to it the first time. But unfortunately, the best songs on the album are Losing Control and Gone, and then everything else is a huge step down. Even though the album is really short, it feels like a lot of it's filler, and I'm the kind of person who is fine with quality over quantity. I'd rather have a shorter album that's really good than a longer album that's got some mediocre songs. Well, even though it's only 10 songs, a lot of it feels like filler. And a huge mistake that the band made was not waiting to make the deluxe edition available physically. I'm not really sure what happened, but they had a little bit of a mix-up with the record label. If they wanted to put out physical copies of the deluxe edition, they would have to wait a few more extra months before releasing the album, and Red didn't want to do that. They wanted to get their music out quicker. Unfortunately, one of the stronger songs on the album is The Mask Slips Away, which is the deluxe edition song. The rest of the deluxe edition doesn't bring that much to the table. It's mostly just a couple remixes, a couple stripped away versions of the other songs, but it still completes the listening process. And like I said, it's produced great, but we've come to expect from Red to have real orchestra. 4 of the 6 Red albums, they've used live orchestra. This is one of the 2 that didn't. And I'm all for using programmed instruments. I realize that they have a lot of power. You can do a lot with them. In the long run, it can save you a lot of money and a lot of time, but there's something that a live instrument can capture that a computer program can't quite get all the way, and that's the human soul element of it. Now, if Red had always used programmed orchestration, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but we've come to expect live orchestration from them. Side note, I also think that their cover of Unstoppable by Sia is a little misplaced. I don't have anything wrong with it. I think it works, but I feel like that song in general in the pop music culture just kind of came and went. Like, people loved it at the time, and then it just kind of went, and no one really cared. And like, a lot of the time when a rock band covers a song, it's to make themselves more popular. It's to help break into a new demographic, at least a little bit, but I don't think this does that. Number 5, we have Innocence Instinct Part 2. Oh wait, sorry, Of Beauty and Rage. Now here's where the controversy is already going to start. That means I like this album less than Release the Panic, and I think in a lot of ways, coming off of only a couple years before having Released the Panic, in a lot of ways, Of Beauty and Rage is a better album. The other album that didn't have real orchestration was Release the Panic, and it also didn't have a lot of it anyways. Bump to this, and you have the live orchestra. You have a lot of it too. I remember doing their Pledge Music thing back when this album wasn't being made, and they had said they did 5 or 6 days recording orchestra with David Davidson, who's done all of the composition for their strings on I think all of their albums, at least all of the ones with the live orchestrations. And a lot of the guitar work is fantastic. It's a long album. It's over an hour long, and it feels like a journey. It's one of those albums that you can just kind of turn on, listen to from beginning to end, and enjoy the whole ride. So why is it low on the list? Well, it's the first album where Jason Roche wasn't really involved. Jason Roche was only in their band for the first 2 albums, but over the course of the next 2, that followed, he was still pretty involved in the writing. However, come their 5th album of Beauty and Rage, he wasn't involved in the writing process. He was in Breaking Benjamin now. And I feel like instrumentally it didn't really negatively affect Red. Lyrically, I don't think it really affected them that much, but where it really hit them was in the melodies, in the hooks, and the specific notes and rhythms that the vocals are singing. A lot of them on this album are just really basic. But again, this is much like Gone. It's an album where I listen to it probably just as much, if not more than the other ones, because it's produced so well. Number 4, we have 2011's Until We Have Faces. First of all, I need to remind everyone that I am not hating on Red's music at all. I love all of their albums. So the fact that my opinion is probably not lining up with yours, just let's have a conversation about it and I'll just state my opinions. I do love this album. It did a lot right. It did basically everything right, really. Plus, just my hype was so real for it. The first time I saw Red live, this album had been out for less than a month. I think 3 of the 7 times I've seen Red live was during this album cycle. So I've got to hear, I think, the entire album live before. So I love it. And like I said, if you go down the checklist of what makes a great Red album, it really hits all the marks. Really big, heavy guitars, great catchy lyrical lines, lots of orchestration, live orchestration at that. So where does it go wrong? Well, when you look at the first 2 Red albums, this one just doesn't quite get there. And I think a lot of that is because it feels like you've heard it before. And that's because you have. A lot of the vocal melodies are just recyclings of older Red songs, or at least pretty dang close. You listen to Let It Burn. Yes, it's very different than Let Go from End of Silence, but the actual notes and patterns of the vocals are almost exactly the same, at least in the chorus. Same can kind of be said with Faceless being compared to Shadows off of Innocence and Instinct. So again, there's nothing really negative about this album other than that it doesn't, like, when compared to the rest of their stuff, it just feels a little less passionate. It feels a little less inspired. I think the strongest part of this album, though, is this more use of electronic elements moving forward that really helps Red. Like I said with the last 2 albums, what kind of keeps you coming back is the little ear candy things that they do on the production side of things. And a lot of that is because of the electronic stuff, the little subtle things that you hear, but don't really take much note of it because it's not the highlighted part of the music. So, you know, hats off to Rob Graves again. I've kind of always thought of Rob Graves as the extra member of Red. He's kind of been there. He's produced all of their albums except for Release the Panic, and he kind of makes Red sound what it is. And honestly, I don't think they would be as good as they are without him. Now, here's the controversial one. Number 3, we have 2013's Release the Panic. I remember Red fans got so mad over this album, and I was too. I remember hearing Release the Panic was the first single that they put out for the album, and I was like, that doesn't even sound like it's mixed. It sounds like a demo. And a lot of that is, again, the production side of things. It's the one album that was not produced by Rob Graves, so that by itself is going to make it sound way different. Side note, it's produced by Howard Benson, who is actually one of my favorite music producers. You've heard tons of albums produced by him, I promise you. Awake by Skillet. I think he did Rise by Skillet. He's done at least a couple of the 3 Days Grace albums. He did a lot of work with Flyleaf. He did We As Human. He's done some Shinedown, Daughtry. He's done tons of records that are fantastic rock albums, but then it didn't really seem to translate that well when Red did it. Now, he has his own production style, but that's not what we come to expect from Red. And part of that brought a much poppier sounding Red. Instrumentally, the guitars are not as heavy, and part of that's because the riffs aren't that heavy. The guitar tone is much smaller. The drum beats are a lot more simple because they're poppy. So far, it kind of sounds like I'm saying a lot of negative things about the album. So why is it so high up on my list? Because it's an album that people get. If Release the Panic was done by any other band other than Red, more than likely, we would love it. We would say it's a great rock album. Might not be our favorite rock album ever, but it's pretty good. Like I said, instrumentally, it's pretty basic, but it works. And the lyrics are great. The hooks, vocally, melody-wise, are great. All these songs are pretty easy to sing along to. They're all really catchy. Now, I probably listened to it the least out of any of them, but again, if, say, any other band had made this album, or if this was just a completely new band, we would say it's a great rock album. Okay, it's time for the last 2. And this is kind of another one that might be a little controversial, but we'll kind of just get through it. Number 2, End of Silence. Red's 2006 debut came out on 6/6/06. Rock and roll, baby. A lot of Red's fans have kind of been there since day one, and a lot of that is because of how effective their first album is. I think part of what got Red fans excited is because it's a short album too. It's short, but it's so good that you're like, that was such a great experience. I can't wait for whatever's next. Think about it. Probably most of the first Red songs we heard were from this album. Breathe Into Me, huge song. Already Over, Pieces. There are so many great songs. The guitars sound so good. I'm a sucker for guitar tones, in case you can't tell. I really have nothing negative to say about this album, but it's a great album. All the songs are really catchy, and you know, you could make the argument that a lot of the guitar work is really simple, but I think it goes to show that, like, if it's well produced, the vocals are really good, the guitar doesn't need to be that complicated. So take that, metal elitists. Number 1, we have 2009's Innocence and Instincts, Red's second album. What I said earlier, End of Silence was a great album and it made everyone want more. more. Innocence and Instinct was that more. It took a lot of the elements that we got on the first album and then kind of escalated them. And so much of it is effective for that reason. I feel like as far as guitar tones is their best album. Guitar riffs, best album. Did a video that was playing almost this entire album on guitar for that reason. Check that out, link in the description. Side note on that, a lot of why I think that is because a lot of the riffs are actually very new metal oriented. You make you think of bands like Korn and Linkin Park as far as the intervals that they're doing and the kind of bouncy effect. Although rather simple in concept, they kind of make your hands feel a little awkward when you play them. And I feel like that just made some stupid heavy music. Also, this album is mostly tuned much lower than the last album. And, you know, I don't necessarily believe that lower tuning means heavier music, but this album you could use as an argument that I'm wrong on that. And then lyrically, it's just so dark. It's not really a concept album. I would argue that Red's never really done a concept album, but I think that enough of the album has the similar lyrical concepts where you could kind of argue that it is. A lot of it has to do with our inner turmoils, our inner struggles, fighting with the good and evil within ourselves, thus the title Innocence and Instinct, and it's great. I also want to point out though that I would not have ranked this album as #1 on the list had we been talking about the normal 10-song edition. I feel like it would probably be 1 or 2 notches lower on the list. It really is the deluxe edition that kind of pushes it forward. 2 of those extra songs are just really up in your face, really heavy, and add a little bit more contrast, especially against the softer songs on the album. And then Nothing and Everything kind of is a callback to End of Silence, I feel like, in a sense, because they did Already Over Part 2 at the end of End of Silence. Well, that's kind of what Nothing and Everything is. It's kind of a stripped down callback to Fight Inside, and I kind of wish Red had kept doing that. Also floating around on the internet, there is a song called Condor, which is an unfinished instrumental from this album, but it's on YouTube. Check it out. So thanks again for watching. Make sure to subscribe, follow All Things Christian Rock on Facebook. I will be keeping you updated with new Red stuff. At the filming of this video, it's only a couple days away from them releasing their new single, The Evening Hate, so make sure to hit them up, get ready for that. I'm sure it's going to be great. A couple years down the road, I might do this video again. Maybe my opinions will change. Let's see how the new music affects that list as well. So yeah, thanks again for watching.